Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. The Pacific is a region of escalating concern for military leaders, ranging from the Pentagon to the island nations of the region. With the U.S. focusing ever more on possible future conflict there, it's been working on shoring up ties with nations like the Philippines and other allied countries to improve interoperability. It's under those auspices that military leaders from a host of nations gathered at a recent conference in Hawaii, where Defense News' Jen Judson was on hand. Here's some of her conversations with officials at LandPAC 2024.
Well, thank you so much, General Hugwig, for joining us here at LandPAC. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thanks, Jen. It's great to see you as well.
In the Pacific, as opposed to landlocked places in the United States.
Yeah.
You learned a lot at Talisman Sabre. That's what we talked about last time.
Right.
So that was last year. Can you lay out some of the big lessons that you learned at Talisman Sabre and how you're going to take those and implement them as you're planning for the next round of Talisman Sabre in 2025?
The Talisman Sabre was a great exercise for us in that oftentimes sustainment as a warfighting function doesn't necessarily train itself. Yeah. It trains to support other units or activities, maneuver, fires, things of that nature that are going on. And the great thing that we learned as part of Talisman Sabre is the power of actually rehearsing sustainment. And then we took that same idea and have been applying it to exercises since then.
Okay.
And I think that'll just continue to crescendo up and continue to build ultimately that we make Talisman Sabre 25, better, more inclusive, and then just continue that effort.
Can you talk about how the 8th TSC is participating in Bala-Katan? I did have a chance to see from afar the work that Army divers were doing to dredge a port area and work to improve that on one of the northern islands. But talk about some of the things that you were doing at Bala-Katan and why those things were important to both the Philippines but also for the U.S. Army when you talk about projection.
So most of the actions that we were doing, at least in the day-to-day exercise implementation, were tied to the engineer effort that you saw, to dredge, building a warehouse to support humanitarian assistance. And we had the dogs out there doing some military police work with them and some EOD work that we were doing.
You're both in charge of multi-domain task forces. It's very hot right now. I've been writing about the MDTF since it was an experimental unit in 2018. A lot has happened. Now you are operational units. You are two of three dedicated to the Pacific. The third one is yet to stand up. But what are some of the things that you achieved during Bala-Katan and some of the other exercises this year as part of your MDTF?
First of all, Jen, thank you so much for hosting us, and thank you so much for visiting our soldiers forward in the Philippines. I know that was really exciting for them and their ability to showcase for you the things that they are doing for the Army right now. As we look at our fires platforms, we're doing side by side with the Philippine Army Artillery Regiment. We are experimenting and really applying our readiness when it comes to HIMARS, when it comes to our mid-range capability, and we're doing that as we look at shared interest when it comes to the territorial defense of the Philippines. We have a protection, really our ADA, our air defense artillery. Soldiers are forward working with the Philippine Army counterparts and the armed forces of the Philippine counterparts doing subject matter expert exchanges. And then our support battalion that just stood up this past fall actually have multiple nodes throughout the Philippines.
Okay.
What we've been able to focus on, much like General Harrington highlighted in terms of putting the people and the concept in place and then letting sort of the doctrine and how you integrate those systems will follow quickly.
Yeah.
We've seen success in our ability to synchronize with the Joint Force. The fact that we're stationed here in Hawaii is not by accident.
Yeah.
Within about a 15 minutes drive, I've got access to every single component command headquarters and the joint headquarters for which we work every single day.
Yeah.
So our focus has been on how do we actually integrate our command and control, how do we fuse the intelligence picture, how do we interoperate at the operational level throughout the theater. And then through the pathways exercises, we've been able to exercise it and then actually be able to start to deploy some of that capability forward.
What are some of the capabilities that you are experimenting with now, across the various companies and battalions as part of this?
I'll give an example. General Harrington highlighted high altitude balloons. So we're working with those high altitude balloons, and not just the balloons themselves. They are the platform to do something with
payloads.
Many different payloads. So we're also experimenting with the payloads, and then through the application, how do we actually now move the data across the vast expanses? So the backhaul of data is a whole other area that we're experimenting.
Extension.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
And I always think it's interesting to look at as, we talked a little bit about space, we talked high altitude balloons, but we really look at a family of systems all the way from space, all the way down to that terrestrial layer.
Yeah.
So you saw the K-1000, UAS being operated in the Philippines.
Yeah.
That allows us in that air layer to, again, have optionality for the Joint Force Commander of payloads that we can employ. And then also at the terrestrial layer, we look at
the electromagnetic spectrum,
exactly right.
those capabilities.
And our ability to do that from terrestrial layer all the way up to space allows us to now get out at the range that we've never been able to get to before.